Welcome, Katie. Why don't you introduce yourself to get going?
Sure. So I'm Katie Lewis. I just recently defended my PhD at MIT, and my thesis looked at developing domain-specific generative models. So I looked at developing generative models for a bunch of different applications.
Okay, well, thank you. And I have a bunch of questions. First of all, let me just say, I love that what you're doing is different. I think I think there's a certain trend to what most people have done, and yours is very different. So one of the first things that caught my eye was virtual try-on, and I thought even the name was very cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Sure. So yes, during my PhD, I collaborated with Google looking at virtual try-on. We developed try-on GAN. So virtual try-on is looking at if you take a image of a person that wants to try on clothing, how can you enable them to, how can you synthesize images of them wearing different clothing from online stores? And so we looked at building a GAN method to generate photorealistic images.
And I can imagine there's all sorts of applications for this, right? I think all of us wonder at times, shopping online. I hate going to the stores, but and so I always miss when I buy things online. But what are some of the applications that you envision, and perhaps some of the ones that you hadn't thought of? Because at times, as we start thinking about something, odd cases come up. But what are some of the use cases that you ran into?
Sure. So we sort of looked at it in two different angles. On the one hand, there's the online shopping experience. So we started working on this during COVID, where it wasn't possible to go into stores. So it was a very real case where if you want clothing, it would be nice to be able to virtually try it on. And then there's the other angle, which is more on the online store, looking at diversity. So if you're able to try on clothing, it's usually not feasible for companies to hire models of every size of clothing that they offer. But if you can use virtual try-on, then you can generate models of different sizes and offer more diversity on online stores. So we tried to look at it both from the user perspective and also on increasing diversity for the company perspective.
And what were some of the challenges that you ran into as you looked at this diversity of models? And there's whenever we started to look at anything, and we get deeper into, we find all sorts of things that we weren't expecting. But what was that like? And you can talk about the technical or perhaps the social or human. What was that journey like?
Yeah, so I think it's an issue I was very excited about, but not many virtual try-on works have looked at this size diversity issue. And one reason is data. So a lot of these generative models, they rely on a lot of data. And if the data doesn't exist, then it's hard to learn from something that doesn't exist yet. So trying to generate these models of different sizes, the first challenge was data collection, of finding examples of diverse sizes and how clothing changes depending on body type, and how can we generate the most realistic versions. So one challenge was first collecting the data to train the models on. And in addition to that, I think there's so much diversity with clothing. So the type of fabric, the style of the clothing, whether it's a loose fit or tight fit, trying to learn all of that from images and how it might generalize to different body shapes. It's a challenge.
Oh, I can imagine. Any funny stories to tell about that when it comes to fabric and trying to do this?
Let's see. I think it's interesting. So when we worked on the first try-on problem, I think the results, there had been previous try-on works, but definitely not quite realistic in terms of what they try to fill in the blanks with. So the generative model might get part of the way there, but it'll fill in the blanks. So it was interesting to see how it warps the clothing sometimes into totally different clothing.
I'm sure at some point you got funny and unusual pictures, right? Or maybe all along the way, right? So let me shift gears a little bit here, and I believe I read, within your thesis, the opportunity to be able to collaborate and use it perhaps in a supportive way. And as you know, there's a lot of controversy as to replacing humans or what role does it play. I have my own opinions that I can share if you're interested in, but what's your thoughts? You talk about collaboration between human artists and new technology, and I even shared with you a link of some artists speaking up saying, hey, we do want to use this, but what are your thoughts as you touched on this?
Yeah, so I think the letter that you shared was very interesting, and I think it captured the complexity of the issue that artists aren't just one entity. There's a lot of different processes and ways that these generative models can be used. I think in terms of looking at them as tools, I think art is very interesting, not just the final output, but the whole process of how you go about creating the art. So I think thinking about these generative AI models as tools, I think they do open up a lot of possibilities. And one of the work in my thesis was collaborating with an artist, a conceptual artist. And in that case, it was a little different. So when we say generative models, usually you think of ChatGPT, DALL-E, these large models, but there are also highly specialized small generative models. So for the work that we did, we collected our own data that was approved and created these sculptures that were commissioned. So I think there's a wide range of ways that these can be used. I think some of the concerns are valid around copyright and ownership, but I do think it opens up a lot of exciting creative potential.
One of the interesting things as well that I get excited about is I think it also allows non-experts to explore, right? So for example, I like photography and at times I just like pushing on what's possible, right? Not personally, meaning on photographs that I've taken, or perhaps, I went to New York recently and I was taking photos and I was interested in what kind of photos they in this case, it was Midjourney, could generate that were similar perhaps to the ones that I had taken and what kind of things I could do. But anyway, you were going to say something and
I totally agree with you. I think it does lower the threshold. I think like for me personally, I love creativity. I also enjoy photography. Yeah. I think about fashion design or different things, but I can't have 20 careers in one, but it's with these generative AI tools, you can explore different photography, different fashion design.
So I'm curious, in a couple of weeks, I will be speaking to a couple of people from the fashion industry and they took the course that this will be a part of. So before you join, and, I was surprised by how impacted they were by it, considering that it seems so far away from, just a traditional presentation of the material. But have people from the fashion industry reached out to you, and what are some of the use cases perhaps that they have approached you with? Yeah,
I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on this. But I think it was interesting when I first started working on the try-on work in 2021. I actually talked to several designers in London, and I think they were pretty against, or they didn't like the idea of the AI taking over the creative role in fashion. They felt like designers, their job is to be creative. They already have their inspiration, but maybe AI can be useful in handling some logistics of the design process. So when I was showing them the try-on results, they were most excited when we talked previously about the generative AI sometimes goes totally rogue and creates these off interpretations of clothing. So they thought the mistakes that the AI made was actually the most interesting part. But I think now that's changed in the recent years, where I've seen a lot of excitement in the online communities about using generative AI for fashion design. So I'm excited to see what happens. I'm curious.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think, there's a great deal that I come from the world of software. So some of my thinking is colored by that, but there's a great deal that we do that's boilerplate, right? Meaning that it's just repetitive. And I think at the very least there, I think it can make our job easier, right?
Mm.
Meaning that if you're a designer and there's certain things that, you would take as boilerplate, but also in this just open exploration, right? I was trying to do, for example, a picture of a companion, and I went through, well, I'll censor myself here because there's some things I'm not supposed to talk about what I did and what the complaints were, but it's tremendous capability to be able to iterate with me and to try to capture a vision that I'm pursuing.
Yeah.
And I think in that there is a speed of iteration that is hard to capture otherwise. Let's say you're a designer and you have a crew trying to interpret your creation. I think that, from your vision to your communication to their exploration and trying to realize this, there is a cycle, right? And that cycle is not going to be seconds. And I think in these platforms, there is that opportunity to be able to explore near to the flow of thought.
Yes.
And I think that's very different. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I also think generative models have changed a lot over the last few years. So I think one sort of complaint earlier on was if you train again on a bunch of existing fashion work, then whatever it spits out is just sort of copying what exists already. But I think with the models now, it's exciting. I see some of these fashion works that are, it shows the flower, the animal, or something in nature that it was inspired by. And I think with these large models now, I've been having fun taking a photo of some scenery and translating that into a fashion design. So I think some of
that's exciting. So let me ask you a technical one, not really technical, right? We're keeping a pretty high level, but there's a lot of discussion in the market as to, do I create my own LLM, right? Like some companies have invested heavily and are trying to do that, and others are trying to do fine tuning, and others are doing in context learning, more from a technical perspective, more within reach, for many organizations. And you say that, you can do small models that are still quite capable. So I wonder if you might share a little bit of your thoughts in this approach and what you would need, in the context of, say, a technical team, or how would you go about it?
Sure. Yeah. So in my thesis, I talk about these large models are very powerful when they're trained on lots of data, but that doesn't mean all specialized approaches are sort of out the window and only these large tech companies can develop them now. I think for specific domains, like in the medical domain or in law, and then also just for particular applications like Tryon, where you have very specific inputs and outputs and control that you want, I think these specialized models are useful. Part of that is specifying and training on very specific data to your domain, and part of it is privacy concerns. So I think there are a lot of use cases for specialized models. In terms of what that looks like from an engineering team perspective, I think fine-tuning is very helpful. So taking the capabilities of these large models, but then fine-tuning it to your specific task. We had a project on how can we use GPT and the sort of prior knowledge that GPT captures, but fine-tune and sort of channel it into specialized models. So I think there are ways to use these the intelligence of these large models, but inform specialized models.
I'm always surprised by how this sort of circular approach works. Like, for example, it generates something that has security issues, but you might ask it again to look at it and critique it for security, and surprisingly so. So those work. So let me ask you one of the silly ones. I'm sure you have nieces or sisters, and when they ask you about what you do, and I'll throw in there also, how did you first become interested about generative AI, and how do you share some of your excitement, with say younger relatives or kids?
Sure. Yeah. So I think similar to you, I've always enjoyed photography and more creative hobbies. And so I think, and I've also always enjoyed more math and coding. So I think to be able to bring those two together was really exciting for me of taking like sort of visual aesthetics, things I'm excited about, and figuring out ways to code them. I think one of the exciting things about generative AI is you have control. So like you said, if you have a vision in your mind, it's really exciting to be able to code that and visualize what you are trying to communicate or picture. So I think that was very exciting for me.
And any thoughts about how you've shared that with, say, kids or young relatives?
Yeah. So I think generative AI learns from different images, from different texts, and just like kids, or just like people take in their experiences and use their imagination to create things. I think generative AI is a really exciting way to use your imagination to create new things, new stories, new photos, new designs. So I think it's exciting to be able to use your imagination and create.
So thank you. And let me ask you, anything you would like to comment on? I mean, I'm sort of putting it on your side. I think, we're at the early days of this, right? Although, it's been around for 5-6 years. I think publicly it's less than a year, right? That people have had access. Any thoughts on, where it's going, what industries you think have maybe low-hanging fruit, or any thoughts around these directions?
Yeah, I think one exciting thing is personalization. So, I mean, it could be good or bad, but I think being able to personalize content, both in terms of storytelling, text, or images, to paying attention to style, what kind of music you want. I think the personalization of generative AI, being able to learn about your style and being able to create according to your style is exciting.
No, that's a great one. Now, I've been using heavily for the last year or so, and at times I feel frustrated now when, I'm writing email. I want it to do more for me, or when a number of tasks, I'm just saying, come on, I need help. So thank you for your input and sharing a little bit of your research perspectives. I wanted to end with the following question, and this I got from your thesis, and I'd ask you can you tell us about Kaya, if I'm saying that right?
Yeah, sure. So Kaya is my dog. She's a 9-year-old Catahoula. She's very cute. I saw one story to share. So she's a 65-pound dog. She's a pretty big dog, but she's such a lap dog. So whenever we're in the car, she really wants to sit in your lap. And so towards during my PhD, we were driving to visit my husband's family for Christmas, and I had a paper deadline. So I was sitting in the passenger seat, and she wanted to curl up in my lap, and I had to work on a paper during this 11-hour drive. So I had this huge dog in my lap and was typing on my laptop in front of her.
Oh, that's great. I love dogs. I think they make the world better.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I'll reach out and share the recording, and I think thank you for your input, and I'll be sharing it, as I mentioned, with the new class, and I'm sure they'll all appreciate a fresh perspective.
Yeah, thank you. It was great to talk with you.
Take care. Okay.